Hello and welcome to Supercharged episode 207. I'm Adam Dotchis.
And I'm Tommy Houghton.
And today we are first we're going to answer a nice question about homemade porn, but then we're going to be talking about getting started on a project, how to get the productivity going when you're like, I don't want to do anything.
Get those creative juices rolling.
So that's the main topic, but first, what does Yahoo Answers have for us?
And here's how to get our creative juices rolling today.
Yeah.
Here is a Yahoo answer that we randomly selected out of a group of, I think, valid questions, only a few of which are on that site. Question is, how to stop my computer making porn videos? My computer keeps making porn videos for my nude pics of myself on its own. Is there a way to stop it? Now, before we get in, here are the 4 questions already offered, and I think we might be able to do a better one. Answer 1 is turn off your webcam.
You mean answers?
Yes, that's what I meant. Answer 1 is turn off your webcam. Answer 2 is delete your porn pics from your computer. 3, rename your pics and their extensions. And 4, go kill yourself, bomb, knife emojis.
Well, that's that's the answer to every Yahoo question, it seems.
I mean, and someone failed to mention destroy your computer.
Yeah.
So what comes to mind,
Well, it sounds like maybe no one's like illegally making porn videos. It seems like something's generating porn videos out of those photos.
Yeah, I think the easiest culprit, if he has an Android phone or uses Google Photos, and they automatically upload Google Photos, if you take any kind of stream of multiple photos in one session, it'll make an animated image of like a time lapse of all those things. Google Images likes to make suggested features things, so it could very well be that they're automatically backed up to the cloud for him, and whatever service he uses or they automatically back up to, they're just making handy things saying you might like this. That's one thing I know is a problem, is automatically backing up images you don't necessarily want backed up.
Yeah, that I wish there was an easier way to just like throw photos into a bin of like, please just don't even show these.
Yeah.
And I don't have anything on my phone. I don't take dick pics. If I'm going to take a dick pic, I'm not going to take it with the phone camera or something like that.
You do like a Polaroid or something?
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, like I would use a different app or where it would stay in there. It's not something I really have an interest in doing personally.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I don't want to share that with people necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, like Richard and I did it for a little while because I'm not really sure why. I think he wanted to do it or thought I would want it, and then we just didn't care that much.
That's good as you tried it.
Yeah, we're just boring. But I mean, like, neither of us were, I guess, upset by it. We were kind of like, well, I'll see you when you get home, though, so it's all good.
There is a fun site that rates dick pics, and it suggests more ways to make them creative. And it's very funny. And then there are people that will paint, like, fine art your penis picture.
I want to do a cock art thing. Yeah. I want to make an app that uses AI to identify your penis and then turns it into art.
I love that. See, that's very lovely.
Just to elevate it. So like if a lot of women probably, I think is the majority, don't want dick pics. So if
especially unrequested
well,
ones.
Yeah, exactly. So I figure if that app's out there, maybe they'll get a few nice pieces of cock art instead. It's a step in the right direction.
It's a step in the right direction. And you should perhaps have a message that says, like, a pre-message that says, like, do you consent to me sending this to you? And if you say no, then they don't get it.
Yeah, or just have it put at the bottom that it's like, if this is non-consensual,
you can pay.
Please report this user to cockart.com.
I think that's fair, and then they can shame that person.
Yeah.
But in that case, those are all times when you would like to be making a picture of your penis or of your genitals of some capacity. But in this case, it sounds like this person is not pleased. I actually don't get a gender from this, but this person's obviously upset. The computer seems to be making porn images without this person's consent.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just assuming it's a guy because it's likelier that a man would be taking nude pictures of themselves.
I mean, I think
for a collection.
I think all people like to have done sexy pictures.
Oh yeah, no, I don't think it's a thing where women don't want to. I think women are just more paranoid.
So it's making it on its own
for good reason, not to say that's that's like an unrealistic paranoia. It's a realistic paranoia because women get targeted for this stuff more, so they should be more paranoid.
Yeah, I think, and honestly, when it comes to sex pics, anyone should be paranoid. I think it's really hard when you have internet images out there it's really tough to take them off.
Yeah,
So
I forgot to put our 5-minute timer on, but we're almost done.
Yeah.
So
and I think let's go through the advice. I think turn off your webcam. That's pretty useless. It may not be your webcam doing it. Delete your porn pics from your computer. That's silly. Rename your pics and their extensions is actually pretty clever. If you have images stored on a computer and you want to really hide them and don't get rid of them, taking like on Windows and Mac, you both have to enable the ability to see extensions of files. But all file types have extensions. Most images are JPEGs or something of the sort. And so going through and enabling that and then changing the extension makes it where the computer or whatever can't read them and won't display them.
Yeah.
And all you got to do is add them back at the end.
Also, every computing platform for the most part has some sort of like secret folder type thing.
Yeah,
or
you can
like
hide files.
Yeah, I mean, like if you want to hide files from Spotlight on a Mac, for example, you can go into the Spotlight settings and do that. You can have encrypted folders or whatever.
Yeah,
you can download software to do it. Yeah, so it's like, just don't put the photos in a completely open folder.
Yeah.
I don't know what is getting into this. But
I'd also turn off cloud backup, and if you have an Android phone, I'm not sure how iOS does it, but with Android, you can disable automatic backup to the default photo app by even disabling it by folder. So if you have sexy pics being taken or displayed, you can store them in a private file system with passwords. You can disable them being discovered by those things and upload it automatically. And then I would just take a picture or share those using that app.
Yeah. And one thing I wanted to mention, because I received I don't know what you'd call it, but it was like a fraud email, I guess, saying like, hey, I broke into your account and here's your password, so you know that I'm serious, because they got it from a password dump online. Like, I have a password. They sent me the password that I let leak out there to basically verify if these people are trying to break into a real account or a fake one.
Yeah.
So I have accounts that I do not secure for this purpose. If my security methods were paranoid before that I got hacked, this is what I've evolved to at this point, is that I am like preemptively setting traps to be able to identify where people are coming from. And if I'm not going after anybody because I don't have time to do that. There are a lot, but this was the first time I had got one of these before, and I went through and I did a whole, I'm going to post this on our blog at some point, but when I get a chance to like go through and make it look like a blog post, but I already wrote it, and there's this whole list of like picking apart this email and how you can tell why it's fake, that's
actually, I think, would be valuable to people.
Yeah, because I was looking, I wanted to verify before I responded to this person and was like, hey, you're full of shit. Because I knew they were, because they said they turned on my webcam and recorded me masturbating, and then they're like, oh, good, by the way, good choice on the porn.
Yeah, like, it's the claim that they'll show it side by side.
Oh.
Yeah, no,
I don't think they said they'd show it side by side, but they did say they'd release what I was masturbating to on LinkedIn.
Yeah, there's a thing where they make a video by showing it's a dual thing. It's but I've heard the scam from a lot of people. It's spreading where they share the link password that comes from an info dump, and it's generic. So it's your email. It's like almost like a mail merge where you basically say password, email address, and name or whatever. Yeah. And then they'll say they have a video of you masturbating and then the porn and next to it, and then they'll share both at the same time.
Yeah, and the fact that they sent it to my LinkedIn email just told me that this was, like, right away I was sure. But I also know I'm not being recorded masturbating, because and this is where this becomes relevant, if it's in a situation where the images are, if this person's question is about images that are being taken without their permission and then made into a porn movie and they want that to stop, then I mean, that's it. You basically have to block your webcam, like you said. Well, yeah, but when you're masturbating, put the laptop forward enough so that your dick's not going to get the view of the camera.
Cover the webcam.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. Like, you may not want to or can't.
Well, no, you can't. You can literally just put a post-it note over it.
My number one recommendation for blocking webcam is getting Light Dim's Blackout Edition. It's a sheet of sticker dots. They're a little overpriced, but it's one of the best worst as seen on TV commercials if you are a Lifehacker fan and have been since like 2015 when I think Alan posted them for the first time, you can see the commercial on there. Seriously, go watch the commercial. It's hilarious. But light dims and light dims blackout edition dim the LEDs, as they say, harmful LEDs that keep you from sleeping. And I'm really sensitive to light.
Sure.
So that is fairly accurate in my case. And so I have light dims on everything in the bedroom. And I have blackout edition because I don't want to see them in general. Sometimes they're useful, but for the most part, a little bit of light will leak out like the side of a button or something. So I can tell if it's on if I'm really scrutinizing it.
Yeah.
Anyway, the point being, light dims are they have like the normal size that you get the most of. They fit right over the webcam hole, and they're really easy to remove. So
that's helpful.
Yeah,
I got one at E3 one year that was an eBay thing that just said eBay, but then it had a slider, so it could slide a shutter open and close. But Mark Zuckerberg, in a video of him,
that would be nice.
Mark Zuckerberg had a piece of tape over his webcam, which shows that Zuckerberg knows enough about internet security he himself has.
If I were him, yeah, I mean, like, now that I'm using Character Animator, I actually have a use for the webcam.
Yeah.
So I haven't been able to cover mine up, but I'm not as actively as I probably should be. But I have another webcam somewhere, and I want to hook it up to my desktop because I would rather be doing Character Animator stuff on there, at least the recording parts, because it's really processor intensive. And on a laptop, it just kills it. So I really want to do that, and then not have to worry about it because I don't need to masturbate in front of a 4K television.
That's just too much.
Yeah, and I'm not going to get into the TMI here, but let's just say that I know that. So it would be better to move the webcam over to there. I don't know how many people use their webcams on laptops. I mean, like, honestly, I'd rather just not have it.
I use mine, but yeah, I get why it's helpful to have it connected, but
yeah. It would be nice if they did come with a cover.
I know, I agree. It should. 100%.
I'm surprised that no manufacturer has done that. I mean, if Apple did it, everyone would do it. It's unfortunately it doesn't work in the reverse, unless. Well, I don't know.
I think it would acknowledge that there is some inherent issue with privacy. There's the same reason why Android for a long time, Android didn't for a long time have a reset button, thing, because they claimed Android didn't have to be restarted. So,
but doesn't it sometimes have to be for reasons?
In that sense, it would automatically do it, or give you a prompt to do it automatically, but it wouldn't be like hold power button down and have an option to restart. But they finally added it in because there was this perception that having it on there makes it seem like it needs to be restarted all the time, which it doesn't. But
yeah,
they added it finally. But it's that perception of having a physical hardware button for hiding stuff. I think hints that you don't need to do it because it's secure. But it should be.
Yeah, I must have gotten to Android too late before that happened, or just never noticed it. I mean, I don't ever like to have to restart anything, and that's really how things should work. But
no, I agreed in theory, but with hardware and chipsets and stuff, it's always impossible.
Yeah, that'll be the dream if I don't have to restart a computer. I mean, that's really where I don't mind restarting my phone, other than it takes a little while.
Yeah,
it's the computer I don't want to restart.
Yeah, no, I agree. Because
even with like Mac OS's, I don't know, whatever it's called, that boots everything back up from memory. It's really slow at it, for one. And it sometimes doesn't do it properly, especially if you had to force restart because of a freeze or something like that. And it I don't know, it doesn't work very well. Like, I would rather that the apps don't boot back up, but when I do open them, it remembers exactly where I was, and it saves those states constantly.
Well, that would make it easier.
Saving should not be a thing we have to worry about that much anymore.
Agreed, 100%.
Just because I mentioned Character Animator already, that is an application where you never have to save, and it's funny about it when you try.
It's interesting too when like cloud save should be important for games. Yeah, saving in general is a thing that people should get used to.
Yeah,
or not having to save, but yeah.
We should get onto our main topic.
So, gentlemen with a porn problem, just break your computer. The end. Yeah.
But I forgot we had a question for the show that we had last week, but I forgot about it because it got sent into the awkward email address, and so it gets filed in automatically to the database. If you send it to questions@awkwardhuman.com, it gets filed into the awkward human survival guide podcast questions. So I remembered when we were doing the show last week, oh yeah, I got to remember to do this week. Somehow I did. My memory's not working very well today, but I got there. Anyway, Matthias wrote in to say, I'm using iVPN through the OpenVPN app, and it's killing my battery. I'm talking 5% in 20 minutes. Also, my internet on my Mac keeps disconnecting when it goes to sleep, and I have to restart it for it to work. And the other one is awkward.email's certificate expired. I don't know what certificate we have on there, but I guess I'll worry about that one. You would like help with these things. The internet disconnecting might have something to do with the settings you have on the Mac for what is it called? The thing that the background refresh on Mac, whatever that thing's called, the power nap. If it's not a laptop, that probably doesn't apply, because I think it's if it's not maintaining a connection, that would mean that the NVRAM is not functioning properly. Because it would most likely, because that's where it stores. When your computer goes to sleep on a Mac, this is not something that happens on Windows machines or Linux machines, other PCs. But NVRAM is used heavily by Apple on Mac OS, and I was actually just reading about this the other day. Otherwise, I would not have been able to say this, because it's a big thing with Hackintoshes. You have to emulate it a lot of the time, and it allows a lot of. It seems like, oh, it's just storing some basic info, so you wouldn't need to worry about it. But I mean, in a context like this, but it actually does integrate with the GPU and some other hardware, so it may be very possible here that your NVRAM is having some sort of issue. How you would fix it in this case, I'm not entirely sure, but I would start there as a place to look. But I would also make sure that if it is a laptop, because Matthias, I don't remember what kind of Mac you're on right now. If it is a laptop, though, I would make sure that power nap is not disabled, because that could be what's doing it. That's, I think, the normal behavior if power nap's disabled on a laptop, that it would disconnect and then reconnect upon waking up from sleep. Although it sounds like it just gets stuck off. Is that accurate? I don't know. It's hard to tell from there's not a lot of detail there. As for the battery life, I mean, Tommy, what do you think about that? Because I feel like that's it's a more broad question. I mean, he's on an iPhone, I'm pretty sure.
I don't know anything about iPhones, unfortunately. If it's Android, the idea is that VPN is going to be, I don't know how iPhones do it, but basically if you're using a VPN, which is essentially, it's called a virtual private network, it filters your traffic through different exit nodes, which makes it look like, first of all, if you have internet connection at all, your ISP, your internet provider, if you're at work, they can see what you're looking at. They can see the traffic. They can sniff at the granular level of what you're doing. But a VPN basically masks what you're doing. They can see how much data you're using, but they can't see what exactly it is you're doing. It masks it through a series of gateways and stuff.
Yeah, but so what would be drawing the battery?
So the problem is that with Android, at least speaking to Android, is that any VPN or anything you use, whether it's an ad blocker or anything, all traffic for your phone goes through it. Mm-hmm. And phones are, at least Android has ways of handling it, but it is ultimately going to add more battery drain. I'm not sure why an iPhone would do it. It may not be optimized to handle it, so try to find just a better VPN provider.
Yeah, I mean, like, God, what do I use? I can't remember now. I keep thinking NordVPN because they advertise so much, but I don't use NordVPN.
I mean, there's a ton.
PIA, that's a private internet access. I like them a lot. But you also can avoid using the app on an iPhone. On Android, it's a bit harder, but I would try not using the app. I'd also check what the app is using, go into battery usage and find iVPN on there, OpenVPN on there, and see if it's drawing location information or anything like that might be cutting the battery life. If you're sure this is definitely what's doing it.
Well, ultimately, tweak your settings. Like if you are using a well-known app, there should be people that are having the same issue as you, and research it. Like just search for it, and you can find forums for any app. Ultimately, any well-designed, well-maintained app for any system should not be draining battery at that precipitous level. That company would go out of business if that was their business model, making shitty apps. So if it is doing that, find support for it, and it should help you tweak settings.
Yeah, actually, there's a lot of information online about this.
Yeah, it's not hard to find stuff like that.
there's a forum post that came up immediately. App OpenVPN discharged the battery immediately. This is because the option setting screen and brightness up to activate. It's not written very clearly, so I'm not entirely sure what this person is saying. But apparently it's maintaining the active tunnel even when the display is off. If you disable that function, everything is as before. So I think what this person is saying is that you need to go to the settings screen and brightness up to, I don't know what up to activate means. Like move, you're doing something to activate it. Anyway, Matthias, hopefully you can find that. I don't know what this person is talking about exactly, but apparently everything will go back to the way it was before, which I guess is when it wasn't draining the battery like that.
Yeah, ultimately, if you tweak settings, reset to the normal default and see what happens. But ultimately, you can Google all this stuff and just search for support forums for any app you're using. That's ultimately where to start.
Yeah, okay.
Because chances are, if you're having an issue with the program, someone else is too. And if they aren't, you can always email the developer and they can help you. Because a good developer will always get back to you and find a way to help either point you to support documents or anything. So let them be listened to you. If you're playing with anything like that, a good app will always have good support.
Yeah, apparently it's the keep alive value someone else is saying. And that I don't know if you can actually set that in the OpenVPN app because it's not clear. I think they're requesting the ability to set it. And this was back in 2016. That it should be set to something like 1800 or 1600 instead of 10 or 120, which is what they're apparently at. But again, if none of this works, just sign into the VPN manually. Just specify the VPN manually in the iPhone settings and you're good. Android is, for some reason, not always so great about this. It kind of depends sometimes. I don't know. You would think, like, if anyone was going to get an internet thing right, it would be Google versus Apple, because that's usually the case.
Well,
but
it depends on, again, the developer. it's use an app that's well developed and optimized.
Oh no,
for
I'm
the
saying
system.
like just in the system itself.
Yeah, I don't use the system, honestly. Like a good app is able to, because there's an API for it that will utilize the...
Well, he should use the system settings in this case if he can't fix it through the app, though.
Yeah, but just honestly, go to a better service that's better optimized for handling, that has better support. Because an app that has better support will be better just in general, because it has developers that care and know what they're doing. So using a shitty service is often a good sign of a shitty service is one that hasn't updated for a while and has not...
well, this service, it doesn't seem like the service is a problem. It seems like it's just the app, though.
Yeah, it seems like either you've changed a setting or something. But again, yeah, go to support forums. You can find help for your issue.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like this is actually solvable. So if none of this works, send in some more detail and we'll see if there's a better solution. Okay, so that takes care of that. Let's move on to our actual topic for the day.
So being creative and coming up with anything from scratch is tough. Whether it's any kind of problem or task you're working on from scratch, it can be intimidating to have a blank page, whatever you're working on, whether it's designing a workflow solution or starting a script or any project.
Yeah, I mean, even if you're like trying to build something, some DIY project at home, like you wanted to make like a touch-sensitive coffee table or just like a arcade machine. I don't know why I'm always thinking of these things, probably because I've thought of doing them before or have done them. But I mean, like if you're building something, if you want to, even if you have like a fix-it project, like regardless of the level of creativity, it can often be hard to get started because there are a lot of steps involved. There are a lot of, I mean, you have to figure out like what's the best approach to this thing, and it can feel very daunting, especially the bigger it gets. So today we're going to talk about ways to actually get started, to motivate yourself and to make that process easier so that you don't get stuck at the starting gate or shortly after it. So Tommy, what do you do?
So for any project I start, I usually work in the creative field, but for anything I start, the idea it's like a blank page is always a terrifying thing when you're starting from scratch, whether you have an idea or concept, but you need to execute it to become something physical or permanently built. The idea is people like to look at the amount of work that takes to go from 0 to 100%. And it's often very scary. And people don't like jumping in because it can be intimidating and it's hard to know where to start. It's like trying to climb a mountain in a single leap, which is not possible. So the biggest thing I get out of my way is figuring out what is the end goal. What do you want to do? Is it writing a script? Well, okay, you know what a finished script looks like. You can get there. Is it building something? Is it designing a workflow process? that needs continual refinement or putting together a design document, whatever it is, you should know what the end result will likely look like. Even if that changes in process, you want to know, like, have a starting point. It's not like driving without a destination. You want to at least know in the vague direction you're going. Yeah. And there is a intimidating factor when you sit down, let's say, to write something, or you're starting with a document or design element, and you have just a blank, whatever it is blank.
Yeah, this is something that I have a hard time relating to, because I have the opposite. Like, if it's a revision, I'm like, ugh, I have to read this. And I don't, like, if there's stuff on the page, I don't even want to touch it. But if it's blank, I'm like, yes, I don't have anything I have to worry about.
Well, a giant revision can be intimidating too, because if you have a lot of text, it's like it's getting into the weeds and revising.
Yeah, I mean, if it's like comment based and I just have to go through the comments and fix stuff, that's easy. But if it's like I have to figure out what to revise, or based on
that can be
greater things, that's where I get stopped up the most.
Yeah, a full page. I think it depends on how deep you are on the project. But if you're coming into something and looking at someone else's work or revising on something you haven't looked at in a long time that you worked on, it can also be intimidating starting from scratch on that. And you're dealing with the opposite, where you have tons of stuff to go through, and you just need to find where to start. Yeah,
but they're both similar problems, because in each case you have a ton of stuff that you could do, and you have to figure out what is the thing that I should start with, what should I do, what is the best, what makes the most sense here. And for me, like, I get excited by a blank page because I have an idea and I can just kind of do anything, and that's really, I think, the most important thing as a starting point. Like, it seems kind of silly to say, well, if you're having trouble starting, just start, but commit to 5 minutes of doing something.
There is something amazing,
and then you can stop if you want. That's what all you have to commit to is 5 minutes.
Yeah, there's something amazing about the psychology of it, where once you get in the flow of it, and I think the biggest thing is people often like to think they're going to shit out a perfect first draft of whatever it is they're making.
Yeah, that's never the case. That's not I wouldn't say it's never the case. I feel like someone probably has shit out an amazing first draft before,
but it's not perfect. And there's nothing. There's no such thing as perfect. Yeah, but the idea of once you get out of your head that you're not going to be crafting a masterpiece. Yeah. There's a quote attributed to Hemingway that's the first draft of everything is shit, and that's completely true. Yeah. And if you basically expect that whatever you get out, the goal is to get it out, the first version of whatever it is you're looking to do, as quickly as possible. Now, if you're going to be carving something, it's not saying you should start carving something immediately and expect it to be shit, but learning how to, let's say whatever you're doing requires talent of some kind or precision, learning how to hone that skill set on stuff that's bad first, where you can at least start learning how to do it, but you have to do it first. So if you're going to be writing a script, for example, start writing. It's going to be bad at first, but get all your thoughts down and you can revise that later. But there's a psychological impact of starting, that once you start and get in the zone, even like Adam said, with 5 minutes, that can psychologically help you get into this impact where at least you're getting started, and having been done 5 minutes, you're not at that starting point anymore. You're at least 5 minutes in. And that's a huge psychological difference for some reason.
Yeah, and to jump into that a little bit more, what's happening there essentially is when you need to get started on something and you want to do something that you feel like you can, that your brain is looking for an idea of, oh, I want to do this because this will make me feel good. That's essentially what your motivation is I want to feel good. If I do this, I will. You may not want to do it because it's a lot of work and it feels like it's going to be hard, even though you may enjoy it. Or maybe you're not sure you're going to enjoy it, but like it's like it will feel good if this happens. And so you kind of have to get rid of that if, because, and the 5 minute thing works really well for this, because you're essentially saying, I just need to do this one thing for 5 minutes to start on the project, and then I will have accomplished something. And then that gives your brain just enough to, to be like, okay, I'll give it a shot. And then you can go ahead, do that, and then you get a little, kickback of dopamine from completing a task, even as silly and stupid as it was, which is usually the motivation you will then need from the brain to say, like, oh, okay, this is making me feel good. Yeah, you can keep focusing on this.
Especially if you have no judgment going in, because if you're just giving yourself permission to mess around for 5 minutes and start on a path, whether it's brainstorming, writing something, putting something to paper, sketching something out, giving yourself that 5 minutes of no judgment and getting it done, yeah, you feel good, and you look back and say, well, at least I'm not at the beginning anymore. I've now made some progress, and you can chip away. Honestly, every major problem or success story comes from something you have to start doing, and you can chip away at it 5 minutes at a time. Now, obviously, ongoing, if you're just doing a project every 5 minutes, once a day is probably not going to lead a lot, but that adds up.
And even if you do it gets easier.
Yes, exactly. Once you start getting the framework, you can actually get excited Because once you honestly have a roadmap to doing something with concrete goals and steps, it's kind of easier to take that and just jump in and have a starting point, and you just follow these sets. So
yeah, I mean, by doing it, you're teaching your brain a process that makes it possible to get that feeling it's looking for.
Yeah.
So when you do that, and you have this memory now of like, oh yeah, if I go once it's harder for the brain to see a process as a thing than it is for it to see an activity or an actual thing. So for the, if you can get it to recognize this vague process as a means of getting you motivated to do something, that just happens from repetition. So you go through this enough times, eventually, even if you do stop after 5 minutes, it's fine. And like most of the time you probably won't. I've never really known anybody to say, I'm going to do something for 5 minutes and then stop immediately after the 5 minutes.
Well, especially once you get into the habit of it. Once you start the 5 minutes, and then each time you do it, you have permission to go longer and longer. And eventually it'll stop when you feel like you're at a creative point where you're like, yeah, I've gotten everything I need to on paper, or finished a thought or an idea, and then you can step away.
Yeah, and if you want to use the don't break the chain method, that's a really good one to apply here. Incorrectly, and I'm responsible for this to a significant degree, attributed to Jerry Seinfeld. It was not his idea, and he doesn't know how it got. We know how it got assigned to him, but we found that out after. Someone basically just put his name on it because they thought it would get more attention, and it was a good idea. So I'm not unhappy about it. It would have just been nice to know before I wrote a bunch of articles on this, and like a bunch of apps got made from. I wrote an article with a system, and then a bunch of apps popped up after I did this, and yeah, I just wish it didn't get so much attention with a incorrect fact, or a not fact, I guess is probably a better way of putting it, in there. Anyway, you basically just check a box on the calendar every day that you accomplish whatever you were supposed to do. You can download an app that's like a streak goals. Not for running around naked, not those kind of goals, but like a streak of goals in a row. I don't remember what the current apps are.
There are a lot of them that try to gamify productivity, and so productivity is a different thing than getting started. But that's a good way to keep going. Is if you want to regiment yourself to. But
it's a good thing for the 5 minute process.
Yeah, no, exactly. It
to remind you to do the habit. It's good for habit building.
Completely. And so the habit building thing is another thing you can start, is that if you're going to start a project that's long term especially, and you need to have within a deadline, building a habit of being able to fit it into your day where you wake up and do it, or you have a certain time of day that you do it, is a good thing to start with if you're going to be going on this creative project. Another thing too is considering how to start. Now, there's tons of different practices about how to write a script or how to build a table or whatever it is you're going to be starting. There's tons of ways to do it, and people often espouse one way of you got to start this way with outlining and building an outline, and then build a bigger outline and then write. Or you need to sketch out blueprints and do a CAD drawing first, or go through kind of a roadmap and fact finding. That's not always the case. For me, it's like I like to look at what is the end result, like I said, and that can change over the course of development. But knowing at least kind of what you're going for, what your end goal is with the project, is always good. Another idea, though, is you can start with the beginning idea of like, I have this idea and I want to see where it goes. And you could be beginning building. It depends on what you're doing. If you're doing a project for work or that has a deadline, starting with an end goal in mind is helpful, because at least you know what the assignment or requirements are. Yeah.
And so I have a question, though, because you and I both have adopted this process of basically kind of knowing where we're starting and where we're headed, and sometimes points in the middle depending on how much, how far we're traveling, I suppose. No one's ever taught me that. Or said that to me. I've never read that anywhere. It's a very simple idea, so it's not like I feel like I have any ownership of it. Obviously, you came across it or came up with it or whatever on your own independently of me. So I'm just like, have you ever seen that in a book somewhere? Or do people just not promote that because it's so straightforward?
No, I'm sure it's been around. I mean, there's so many self-help books and things out there, and I'm sure I might have read it or absorbed it somewhere. But I think it's just knowing how I work. And it's practical sense of knowing sort of what to develop. But then
I've never seen it not work for anybody. Like sometimes you'll get somebody, you'll get the right outlining process for someone or whatever. But and I think like a lot of books get written on that stuff because they're like, oh, this process works really well for me, and I'm successful, so do what I do. But
And the thing is,
it's very personal. So
yeah, and every project, every person is different. Where I do different ways of development for different ideas. Where if I don't have a deadline or have a vague one a year from now or 6 months from now, I might spend time to develop the idea and spend a lot of time in development trying. Even though I know the end result might look a certain way, I will keep also spinning ideas around. So there's a project we had a game we were doing at a convention, and we knew it was going to be a certain time. We had a lot of time to work on it, and I had the vague concept of what it would be. But I spent a lot of time in the back of my head where whenever I'd go on a walk, I'd spend, at least 10 minutes developing in my head what the experience would be. Mm-hmm. And then it would spend a lot of time where it was just in my head. And then finally one day I sat down because the time was coming up for when we had to turn in hire actors and all that. I sat down and actually began writing it. And that process was helpful because it had been in my head for so long. I had all these ideas and then pitfalls of things that could go wrong. And so in developing it, it was not a straightforward outline method. I had a lot of things, and I would also discuss with people and toss out ideas and get their feedback. So in that one, I just let it percolate in my brain for a long time, which is helpful, letting it sit around. Yeah. Other ideas I've had that I'll sit down, I'll regiment, I'll outline very carefully, and then iterate and test. And that's a big thing for me is there's a phrase especially with game design and writing and creative projects, but I think honestly, even very simple like flows or methods, if you're building a process of something, is think of every way that could possibly go wrong and iterate and overcome them, because you're not going to necessarily think of them over ahead of time. So you just need to test out different processes and see what happens and iterate. So
yeah, because you're generally presented with the way things will work.
Yeah.
People like to focus on the success stuff, but it's important to look at both sides. And it's the same thing like if you're focused on failure, it's important to look at the successful aspects of something that happened. When a relationship ends, when you get fired from a job, when you don't get something that you wanted to get. And that doesn't mean that you did everything wrong.
Yeah, there's things that went right. So it's look at the both sides of it. And for a lot of projects too, it frustrates me and scares me having to put something live in front of people that's not finished.
Yeah.
But some things just by their very nature.
Talking about that earlier.
Yeah, some things by their very nature, you have to do it. You have to put people in front of it to test and learn from it. But I think the idea of getting over that fear and accepting this is going to go horribly, and we're just going to see what happens. Yeah. And you can learn a ton from it. And you may even learn your idea's not great or not going to work out in its current form. And it's totally okay. Yeah, that's part of the process.
Yeah, and that's not to say that it's fun. That's not to say that it's going to be a pleasant experience. I've been through that a few times this year where things didn't work the way, like even close to the way that I wanted them to, partly because they were my fault, partly for other reasons in some cases. But it's one of those things that it's like sometimes it can it's not, I wouldn't say, I think devastating would be an exaggeration because it certainly hasn't deterred me at all, but it can feel like it can make it harder to do it the next time.
Yeah.
And it can't really be like that. Like you have to think, okay, well, how can I get, look at it as like, okay, now I've excised the bad stuff. I know what doesn't work here anymore. So what's remaining and and if I take those parts away, is there anything missing that has to be replaced? And then you can take a look at what was removed and say, this wasn't working, and start with the opposite and see how the opposite fits in as a missing part. If it works, then you have something to try. If you don't, then you kind of just find something in the middle between those two and until something seems to fit with what you want to do. But it's really just, plugging stuff in together until it makes sense for what you want and what your audience, at least, it doesn't fall into the I don't want this, I don't like this category. So it's really just every test, every step of the process is finding information, seeing if what you think coincides with what other people think.
There's a big thing with people too, is learning how to be a good tester. It's really valuable to...
Yeah, it's hard to get good feedback from people because a lot of times they'll come up with stuff just to say it.
And people are horrible at feedback, especially with how cognitive dissonance and psychological principles of people often give themselves more credit for doing things than they realize. Yeah. And so even though you might have directed people because of the way you placed a light in something or the way something is crafted, it may function in a different way. And people will take credit for experiencing it. They can't tell you what. People are awful at telling you why they do things.
Yeah, it's really not a good idea to ask people to come up with a reason for stuff when you're trying to get feedback, but rather like, how did it make you feel when this happened? Or what did you think when this happened? Try to ask the questions that you figure out what you want answers to before you're getting feedback. Because if you go in and just ask them like, what did this mean? Or what did that mean? Or what did you think about this? Then they're going to try to reason their experience. And if you've ever gone through life, and you have, but if you can think of an instance in which this happened to you, where you went through life and you did something and you thought it was weird that you did that, or you're trying to explain your behavior, like you did something that was out of the ordinary for you, and then you later explained it to yourself. That's what people are doing when they're giving feedback most of the time, if you do not make it very focused.
And the thing is, you can also listen to that feedback, but you've got to take it in consideration with also the behavior. So if you're doing...
you have to be careful.
Yeah, if you're doing anything with feedback, it should be part of the puzzle, not the whole thing. Feedback is a combination of hearing what they have to say and also watching how they perform. So if you're doing anything software related or game designing or writing, whatever it is you're doing, you need to watch people too, because people leak data without you realizing it. And obviously, like, behavior, and the reason Facebook and Netflix and these companies are collecting data is because people leak it just through their very behavior. And you obviously don't necessarily have the ability to collect as much as they do, but even just watching people. So when we were testing games and doing the escape room at Stash House that I own, our first tests, we just sat in the room and watched people. Now, obviously, we knew that the early watching phases, people would act differently with us in the room, but after about 5 minutes, they got used to it and ignored us. And watching sort of how they moved around the space and making a heat map of how people moved around, we realized there are parts of the room people inherently wanted to go towards, and people would either also avoid other areas. So we realized, this area might be too dark, so we'd light it. We'd always ask them why they did certain things, but people were often very bad at explaining why they moved over to a certain corner, and we realized they started going over there more when we added more light to it. People were drawn to it, and they couldn't explain often why. Once in a while, someone would say, I went over there because there was a light. Some people can be aware of why they do what they do, but very rarely are they. And it's part of the whole puzzle. People can offer you really good feedback, but it's part of the picture. So when you take feedback early on, consider it, and make an effort to watch behavior. If you're doing any kind of software, create a heat map or see if you can record someone's experience of using it or watch them using it. If you're doing a process of run tests of it, run people through it, see what happens. And also, people don't really work in a vacuum. The process of designing or working on something is also really silly when you try to reinvent the wheel. There's no reason to ignore other versions of what's out there. If someone, for example, is wanting to write a really good script that's a crime thriller, why would you not read all the best examples of crime thrillers and see why they succeed? It's not saying you're going to copy them, but you should see why they're successful and what is in the DNA of the genre, whatever yours you're trying to create, what makes it work.
Yeah, and again, also read some bad ones.
Yes, and also read bad ones.
Find out why they don't work, but and that goes back to getting started and getting going, and when you're trying to, like I'm failing to do with the sentence, but you have to, you sometimes have to get information. Sometimes the not being able to get started is a problem of just not knowing enough stuff, and thankfully we have the internet. So, when you don't know what to do, read something, watch something, do something related to that to kickstart your brain, put yourself in a different environment mentally. Completely. And sometimes that also means physically. I mean, I'm sure you've heard about this probably goes for more on the writing side again, but if you're, if you need to focus on writing or whatever, like physically going to a different space, like a coffee shop or a park or, whatever, where there's some basic ambient noise going on and you can focus and no one's really going to bother you for the most part. And it's different, then it can help your brain just be like, oh, I'm somewhere else and something else is happening. And I'm, the things that I'm used to doing here don't apply. It's why working at home requires a lot of self-control.
Oh, completely. Because working at home is really challenging.
Yeah, and it's like for me, I don't have a problem doing work, but I have a hard time figuring out what to do if I do it in, say, the bedroom, and I'll feel sleepy if I stay in the bedroom. So I have to, but a lot of times I want to answer emails in bed and then get up and go, and go work or whatever, but I have to really push myself to go into the other room to do actual work. Otherwise, I'll get stuck sitting in the bed and just trying to work from there, which sometimes there's certain things that I do really well from in the bed for whatever reason. Like I just like sitting with my headphones on and plugging away at work, but most of the time I need to go somewhere else and sit in a chair. So, you got to kind of know yourself and figure out what it is that works best for you. But these are the things to try. I think the important thing, if it hasn't been clear from all the suggestions we've been giving, is it's not specific. Yeah, a lot of the advice you get is specific, and it's gonna depend on you. Like, we can't tell you something's gonna help you get started more easily. If it's a 1, 2, 3 step process, you kind of have to figure out that step process for yourself. But we've talked about tips and tricks and so on that can help you get going, and those are the things that you focus on, that and you practice those, and then you find out the details for you personally, how those work, and then that's what you start following.
Yeah, be an active creator, because if you are aware of how you work, it's an active process. You should not do it passively. You should figure out what works for you and figure out the best way to approach. So I think, to summarize the stuff that I always do, and actually a good example is the way Indiana Jones got crafted. Mm-hmm. It was literally Spielberg and Lucas sitting in a room talking about these ideas they had. And then they eventually invited the writer Lawrence Kasdan in. And if you haven't read it, it's really interesting. It's a good creative exercise in learning how, because you know what the end result is going to be. It's going to be a series of movies. Mm-hmm. And having seen them and knowing certain tropes about the character, you get to see the stuff refined. And you see how much creative stuff Lucas and Spielberg throw against the wall. And a lot of it doesn't work. A lot of it's bad. But through discussing it, they refine better and better ideas, especially with Lawrence Kasdan coming in. And what's interesting is that it teaches you kind of the relationship you can have to yourself. You can be 3 things in one. You can be the person that, like Lucas, that tosses out crazy ideas. And you can be Spielberg that helps reel them in a bit and add some ideas to it. And then you can be Lawrence Kasdan, who listens for a long time and then speaks up. These transcripts are available online, and it's really fascinating to watch this process. But it's really valuable, I think. Those 3 parts is, being crazy and throwing everything against a wall, brainstorming. They say, write drunk, revise sober. So come up with all the ideas and things you're looking at without judgment. Do research, toss out ideas, brainstorm creatively and openly, and go for a walk, try different ways of working and seeing what works. And then once you have all that stuff down, begin refining, be the Spielberg and add some ideas to it, refine, and then finally be the Kasdan and refine it to the point where it's okay to toss out all your ideas for one nugget. It's like refining, polishing, and finding the good stuff in there. And again, don't judge yourself for this process. You're going to create a lot of crap, and that's fine. It's the finding the diamond. It's not just
fine; it's necessary.
Yeah, exactly. It's once you accept that fact, the fact of any kind of process. So for me, what I'd always do is I do a little bit of research. I think what the end result will look like. I'll brainstorm and toss some ideas out, and those ideas might be what it looks like at the end, or a crazy way to begin. And I'll just start figuring out through whether writing it down, discussing with someone, and building it out what it will look like. And then from there, I kind of start putting meat on bones, like a skeleton. And build up more and more until I get a schedule of what it will look like. And then from there, finishing the process out. But It's a messy process. Anything creation-wise is. And so starting is the really important part. Because if you start with, a handicap where you're expecting to come up with that perfect first draft or that perfect thing, once you get those judgments out of the way and start coming at it from a more, this is fun, this is great, let's get some 5 minutes down and start working this way, you set yourself up for more success.
Yeah. Because it's just the getting started process is very important, even if it comes out to be a failure, because those failures tell you that something didn't work. So when you go in to do your next 5 minutes or whatever, then you know something not to do. So each thing is just gaining more information, and eventually it will make sense, or eventually you'll realize I need to go ask for help from somebody who's done this before. If you try 5 times and get nowhere,
exactly.
then maybe it's time to ask for some help. But for the most part, it's the sort of thing that you can do by just trial and error and figuring out, and you have the internet, so there's a wealth of information out there. Not all of it's accurate, but I think this audience is smart enough to figure out what works and what doesn't most of the time. Obviously, all of us will fall for something. Sometimes I have, so I'm not calling you guys stupid or anything. We're all a little stupid sometimes.
Yeah, what creative processes work for you? We'd love to hear how you tips you have for starting projects, or anything that's worked for you, or something that hasn't worked. Yeah. Things that you've tried that are massive failures and you will never try again. So we'd love to hear those stories.
Yeah, let us know. And I guess that's pretty much all we've got for this week. So thanks for listening, and we will talk to you next week. Bye. Thanks for listening to this episode of Supercharged. If you'd like to send in a comment or a question, you can do so on awkward.email. You just go on your web browser to awkward.email. It's actually a website. And you can call or text 509-AWKWARD instead if you'd like to just skip all of that and do it from your phone. Also, if you'd like to check out some of our other shows, we've got a lot of great shows now, and we're having more every day, or, eventually. You can do that on awkwardhuman.com/podcast. Go check it out. We've got a lot of good stuff, and we hope that you'll be listening every week. Thanks.